we are on the brink of a global war.
But can I just say one thing about that? Aren't you kind of amazed by how impervious and dismissive media and political elites are of the prospect of nuclear war?
Well, it's unimaginable, and yes, and I mean that's
like they think it can't happen.
Source
it won't
of
happen,
ongoing
it's not worth
frustration. Yeah, and I will say the one thing that Trump has said repeatedly over the past, certainly since he left the presidency, 4 years, that he's received no credit for and should get enormous credit for, is that nuclear war is the worst thing. He was, of course, been briefed on it as the person who controlled the launch codes. He knows what it means, and anyone who spends 5 minutes looking into what a nuclear exchange would actually, do is terrified of it. But only Trump seems worried about it. I don't understand.
Yeah,
why.
I've said this. I've talked about this so many times, and I think it goes back to when Trump was president, in the early stages of presidency. Every time Trump talks about the prospect of nuclear war, he knows that he's limited in what everything he can divulge, but he's so clearly trying to signal, and he often says it, these weapons are of a different universe than even the ones we dropped in Japan.
That's correct.
And he's obviously, as you said, understands and been briefed on.
But you see these morons at the Atlantic Council or AEI or Hudson or this cluster of the dumbest people in the world, all implicated in the Iraq disaster, say, well, maybe tactical nukes are fine.
That an nuclear war
That's like such next level crazy. Like that's crazier than any schizophrenic sitting next to you on a public subway.
I mean,
that's crazy.
We constantly call like RFK Jr. They call him crazy.
Okay.
They call Tulsi Gabbard and Matt Gaetz crazy. Whoever. These people who have been in power, who have been generating American orthodoxy, especially on foreign policy, are the most insane people on the planet. It's because the United States has been the most powerful country in the world. No one could constrain it. No one could stand up to it. And as is true with everything, that level of unconstrained power corrupts people.
That is
and
correct.
These people have been
correct.
in control of this power for decades.
That is correct.
Passed on one to another through this dogma that gets increasingly out of touch and detached from reality. And
megalomaniacal.
Exactly. I mean, at least during the Cold War, I'm not saying it was a good thing, but the Soviet Union and the United States were of equal power. They were competing with one another. They were both very constrained in what they were. They both were petrified of a nuclear war. We almost came to nuclear apocalypse at least twice, especially in the Cuban Missile Crisis through misperception and miscommunication, when a Russian commander of a submarine thought incorrectly that they were using nuclear weapons against the submarine and against Cuba, and almost launched the nuclear weapons at the sub. Came about 5 minutes away from doing so until someone intervened on that sub and said, I don't think that this is actually an attack. It's very possible we've come to the brink of it before. It probably is the single greatest threat to the survival of the species. Not probably, definitely is the use of nuclear weapons. Every time Trump talks about it, you can see the fear that he has, he's trying to convey to others.
Every time.
And Tucker, I'm amazed. This is like impeachment level stuff for Joe Biden on his way out of the door to involve the U.S. directly in a war for the first time. We've been very involved in other ways.
They should impeach him. Why doesn't the Speaker of the House impeach him right now?
There's a constitutional limitation on the president's ability to involve the U.S. in a war without congressional authorization, which is exactly what has happened through the use of these missiles, which, as I said, we need to help direct. And the question is, why? The answer, though, is that the vast majority of the Republican caucus in the House and in the Senate supports what Joe Biden is doing, thinks he should have done this a year ago. And there's probably not a lot of anger in the House and Senate over this, except the question that it's called lame duck for a reason. A lame duck is supposed to be a duck that really doesn't do much, can't do much, doesn't move much. It's by design pretty limited. It's like this transition period.
Yeah, he's floating in the water because he's been shot.
Yeah, exactly. His legs are broken. And so he's lame. This is not a lame duck decision. And it's not like there was any emergency to it. There was no emergency to it. They just wanted to escalate it because they thought Trump wouldn't. And so they did.
So is Christmas really about buying stuff? You'll be forgiven if you assumed it is, because that's the message you receive. But most people sense deep down there may be a little bit more to Christmas. Maybe this is the time of year to focus on growing your relationship with God, to remember there is a God and reach out to that God. Well, to do that, you can check out Hallow, the Hallow app, and its Advent Pray 25 Challenge. Hallow is the world's #1 prayer and meditation app, and for good reason. It's amazing. It's fantastic. We use it. We're proud to use it. This Advent, we highly recommend you join Hallow's prayer challenge for God So Loved the World. Boy, that'll put meaning in your Christmas for sure. You've got spiritual stories, reflections, musics, testimonies. It's really well done. You're not going to get it anywhere else in as easy a form. Just go to Hallow, download it, and bam, it's right there. So this is an opportunity to be transformed by God this Christmas. Don't wait. Get there. 3 free months right now when you sign up at hallow.com/Tucker. My wife comes home and tells me all about it every day. Spend this Christmas working on something that matters, your relationship with God. Maybe the only thing that matters. We hope you will. Hallow. It puts us in this remarkable moment where the only adult is Vladimir Putin. This person we've been told is Hitler and deranged, crazy, dying of 9 different kinds of cancer, can't be trusted. Like the only reason we're all relying on his restraint. That's just a fact right now. How weird is that?
Well, I mean, first of all, this is what amazes me is that I sometimes propaganda is, you have to respect it. It's a very potent field of human knowledge that has been refined over many decades using every field of disciplines, social sciences and psychology and psychiatry. I mean, propaganda is not just some, intuitive thing that people do.
It's not just an argument
science
that you make.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's very powerful. And we love to talk about how propagandized the Russians are and the Chinese are and how there's no dissent allowed. George Orwell, in the preface to Animal Farm, wrote to 1984, wrote an essay where he was essentially saying that overt totalitarianism of the kind that was taking place in the Soviet Union is repressive, but it's not nearly as effective as subtle repression, the kind where you give the illusion that people are free, but in reality, the flow of information is heavily controlled. Because at least when, the guys dressed in black with weapons come and take you and put you in a gulag for criticizing the government, everybody understands the level of repression. It often generates a backlash. But when you combine repression with the illusion of freedom, that's what's incredibly effective. And that's what we have.
People with an abundant consumer economy, like, here are your edibles. Here's your Netflix, calm down.
Yeah.
You can basically get them to do anything.
Yeah. And at the same time, there has been a concerted effort to control what was supposed to be the one innovation that was going to break the centralized control of information, which is the internet. That's why there's so much attention and energy. It's why it's the #1 priority of Western power centers to control the internet, because it's the one threat to their ability to maintain this propagandistic control. This, I still can't believe this, that it's not talked about as much, but right after Russia invaded Ukraine and Western governments decided they wanted full-on support for Ukraine, and this very simple-minded narrative that they fed their public.
Well, after they started the war, the Biden administration started, that's my view of it. They knew that Russia would invade if they publicly pushed Zelensky to join NATO, so they did that. Kamala Harris did it, and Russia invaded. My view is they started this war.
And talking openly about expanding NATO to Ukraine. You can find memos from the highest levels of the U.S. government saying if you do that, it's not just Putin; it's every political faction in Russia that will see it as a war, and they'll annex Crimea and invade eastern Ukraine. Of course, the American government knew that. You can show documents where it says that. But the EU, the minute that war started in earnest with the Russian army invading, one of the very first steps they took legislatively was to ban the platforming, to criminalize the platforming of Russian media, like Russia RT and Sputnik. They made it a crime, and YouTube immediately pulled it off because they didn't want their citizens hearing any information from the Russian perspective. You can hate Russia, you can think Russia is evil, you can think whatever you want about Russia, but why wouldn't you want to hear from the other side? The New York Times used to publish all the time, like the speeches of Brezhnev,
of course,
and Yuri Andropov and Khrushchev, and you could read what the Russians would say. They would come to the United States. They would speak openly. Now it's practically criminalized.
Putin's speech in February of 2022 to his country, nationally televised there, right before the invasion, was absolutely just a remarkable speech, which I, by the way, never got around to even looking at before I got to Moscow. And I was like, I can interview Putin. I think I should watch that speech. I'd read about it, never watched it. And I think, I mean, you can agree or disagree. You can hate Putin. I mean, it's totally fine. I don't care how people feel about Putin. But most Americans had no idea his thinking in invading Ukraine. Like, no idea. Why wouldn't people want to know?
It was just the cartoon he's an evil Hitlerian figure who wants to reconquest all of Europe the way Hitler did. Putin has been in office for 25 years. He has gone through 6 different American presidents. Every single one of them, until you were not allowed to say it anymore, always said, you meet with Putin, he's incredibly shrewd, he's incredibly smart, you can trust Putin. If you do a deal with Putin, you can count on the fact that he will adhere to it.
Other heads of state still feel that way and say that.
Well, American presidents said it all the time, starting with Bill Clinton, that he's rational, that he acts in his self-interest, that he's calculating in terms of, and careful. And then suddenly, this is what amazes me propagandistically, is that overnight, everybody was forced to say that Putin invaded Ukraine simply because suddenly he became this psychotic, evil Hitler-type figure who just wanted out of the blue.
But they all believed it, though. A lot of them, I mean, the people who screamed at me at airports for being pro-Putin, which of course I've never been pro-Putin. I don't have strong feelings either way, but they really had been convinced, not just by MSNBC and CNN, but by the entire oligarch-controlled internet, that like anyone who talked about Putin or raised questions about the war was like for Putin. Like that worked. Propaganda worked.
No, propaganda worked, especially nationalistic propaganda, because human beings evolved over thousands of years to be tribal. Like we want to feel part of our group. We take pride in our group. Like it's why if you're born in America, you say, I'm an American. This is my country. This is what I'm loyal to. It comes from these tribalistic instincts, right? It makes sense because we evolved for thousands of years where if you got expelled from your tribe, you would die. You needed a tribe in order to survive. So we're tribalistic animals. So if you appeal to people's tribalism and say, we're the good guys, we're the innocent victims, our enemy are the bad guys, they're evil, that appeals to people's most visceral instincts. And the problem, of course, is the countervailing punishment, which is the minute you question it. I had, from the beginning, I had on my show, people like John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt and Jeffrey Sachs, and they were all saying from the beginning, there's no possibility that Ukraine can win this war as NATO has defined it, which means the expulsion of every Russian troop from every inch of Ukrainian soil, just simply on size grounds alone. Just basic understanding of history. Every one of them, I think it happened to you too, I know it happened to me, were put on these official lists issued by the Ukrainian government of being pro-Russian propagandists. Everywhere you went, you get accused of being a Russian propagandist or some sort of agent of the Kremlin simply by questioning our own government's propagandistic views or simply trying to understand things from the Russian perspective.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.